Herkese merhaba. Bugün sunumu ben yapacağım, daveti. Öncelikle bu oturumumuz İngilizce olduğu için İngilizce devam edeceğim. Aşağıda interpretation kısmından Türkçe'ye çevirebilirsiniz isterseniz. In this talk, Tilting Point Director of Business Development, Margaret Wallace, shares key characteristics of people, teams, and products that can help drive success in game industry, as well as some key mistakes to avoid. So I will invite Margaret. Hello.
Hi, everybody.
Welcome. So I will let the screen to you, Margaret. You can start whenever you want and you can share your screen.
Okay, well, thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here. Thank you, Indieway, for inviting me, and also a special thanks to the U.S. Department of State, and something that a department that is very close to my heart. I was an exchange student through the Cultural Affairs Office of the Department of State, so I have been fortunate to have had my life changed for the better for them. So I'm really excited to be here, as you can tell. So hi, this talk I'm going to basically cover several things that are relevant to our industry and our ever evolving industry. First, I'll tell you a little bit about myself and my work, and then I'm going to move more into my work, my perspective on the people and the teams and the products that make up our industry. And if you have questions towards the end, please don't hesitate to ask them. I will reserve the last 5 or 10 minutes for any questions that you may have, and I hope I can do my best to answer them for you. So as was mentioned in the introduction, I work with a really amazing company called Tilting Point. I'm the Director of Business Development there. And Tilting Point is a worldwide organization. We have employees from over 24 different countries. We have partners from 15 different countries and more. We have a team of around 195. It's probably even larger than that. The headquarters for Tilting Point is based in New York City, but as you can see from this world map representation, we have offices in Barcelona, in Kyiv, St. Petersburg, Boston, and we also have people working out of Sydney, Australia, Seoul, Korea. We have an office in Seoul, Korea. We have people in California. So it's really exciting to be a part of such a giant international team. And I put the email, the outreach email for Tilting Point at the bottom, and I won't make this too much of a sales pitch, but I do want to say, we are a mobile games publisher. We are very interested in working with our partners, no matter if you're a one-person company or a company of many, many people. It really doesn't matter to us. We publish and help grow games that are in soft launch or in full launch. The most important thing is that we have games that we can assess and look at data and metrics. So if you have a game that you have completed and you have some interesting retention rates and you want to get in touch with us, please do. We always want to talk with developer partners. So, so with that in mind, and that context in mind, I wanted to share with you a little bit about my journey in games. You'll see that my journey in games, and you'll see, is not really a very straightforward road. But it did start with a love of games and a parent, in this case, my father, who's pictured there, and I'm that funny looking kid in the front, who always took an interest in games. He was a gamer before that was even necessarily a word. And my father instilled in me a love of technology. You can even see here, he's holding a very old-fashioned camera. He installed a love of technology in me, and also in games, board games, and also computer games and arcade games. I could go on. But really, even though my journey is different, it did start with a kernel of interest and passion for the world of games and play. But my real entry into the games industry started with a road trip to California. I packed up all of my belongings and moved to San Francisco, California, where at the time, and still is a thriving center for games, Silicon Valley. And from there, I began my career in games. And I won't go over each and every one of these, but it started out working on virtual pets. Then I created my own company. I was the chief executive officer of a company called Skunk Studios. And the reason I'm pointing out the different companies I founded is that every single company that I've either worked for or have been the founder and have run has been a different kind of company. So Skunk Studios, this is a game that I designed and created called Varmints, which is near and dear to my heart. As you can tell, the animal theme continues. Skunk Studios is completely bootstrapped. It was 5 people who got along really well. We all had very complementary skills. In fact, each of the animals, come to think of it, the characters on this screen represents one of us. I'm the one with the yellow bow, but that's weird. This is the founders. From there, I worked with Mattel on so IP and big brand games. I worked on a racing game for Hot Wheels, which was a lot of fun. Then I went to raise money to make a real-time cooperative virtual world when that was a big deal. I raised some venture capital there. I'm one of, I think 1% of women, I don't know what the exact number is, who has raised venture capital. And it was to build this amazing, really fun avatar-driven world where you could take your characters inside of different mini games and play cooperatively. So it was very inspirational to build that technology from scratch. That was at a place called Rebel Monkey, which I was also the CEO of. And again, this was a venture-funded company. We had to shut down Rebel Monkey. And then I co-founded a company called Playmatics, which is still in existence today. My co-founder is the designer of the original Diner Dash games. So we are very focused on game design, and I am proud to say that Playmatics is still in existence. I don't work at Playmatics on the day-to-day, but my co-founder runs it, and it's one of the longest running game companies in New York City, excuse me. But then my career kind of took a divergence, and I worked in health games. So you can see here that I took a part in, this is for smoking cessation, and I was on a grant through our National Institute of Health to design a game to help people quit smoking. And the reason I'm mentioning this in this call is that one thing that I have learned over my career is that games, as you probably know better than I, games are everywhere. There isn't really an industry or a realm of human experience that does not involve some form of play or games, outright games. And so I worked on smoking cessation. I worked with neuroscientists around creating games that measure attention and focus. This particular game, Wonder Aquarium, I don't think it's been released yet because it's still being used in clinical studies in the United States to test about whether the game helps people grow their attention span more. And I think this is interesting because in recent news in the United States, our Food and Drug Administration, the government organization that monitors food and pharmaceutical safety, recently approved having a video game offered as a prescription for treatment of a certain attention deficit disorders. ADHD is what we call it. So again, I just want to say games are everywhere in industry, entertainment, healthcare, science. I worked a bit with Disney and alternate reality game, worked with a lot of big IP. As you can tell, some that are really fun. Then I also worked with making games for citizen science. So again, another application of games beyond simply entertainment, or hopefully citizen science, which is basically using gameplay to help scientists gather data or make discoveries, ranging from genetics to all sorts of applications, astronomy, marine animal identification. It's really a fascinating area, and games play a central focus in citizen science. For a while, I got into gamification. Here's a piece in Popular Science that was written up about my work in that area. I ran a Games and Impact Accelerator for a short time that unfortunately was put on hold due to COVID, but again, got to meet game developers from all over the world who are not only just making games for entertainment, but for a whole variety of purposes. And now, as you might imagine, given the nature of my talk and how long I've been in this industry, I work with founders a lot, and I help advise founders and speak a lot to entrepreneurs and also people who just have an interest in working in the games industry or tech industry in general. So the reason I went into all this is that I really wanted to share with you that there is no single path to success. And while I made many mistakes along the way, and I wouldn't necessarily recommend that you do everything that I did, I hope that I can share with you that there are many ways to find success and engagement in games and working in games and making games for impact, entertainment. And as we all know, games are really probably the most pervasive form of entertainment in the world today, I think, without a doubt, and it's getting only bigger. So with that in mind, I thought it would be useful to focus on 3 areas that I'm seeing some interesting trends, but also maybe a little bit of hopefully useful advice and thinking about how I've approached the industry. I have been in the games industry since 1996, if you can believe it. And I'll tell you, I'm one of the long-term people in the industry. A lot of people don't stick it out this long for a whole variety of reasons that I hope will eventually change, because we need people from all kinds of backgrounds and perspectives in our industry, because again, it is a pervasive form of entertainment. So I'm going to start with the first area, the self area. And this might seem obvious, and this is a piece of advice that I wanted to share, is the most important thing, I think, for having a successful career in games is to just stay nimble. And what does that really mean? And I'll try to go through some of this quickly, because I'm sure this is all very intuitive to all of us and all of you in the audience. You have to be adaptive. You have to really be responsive to changes in the industry, keep your skills sharp, stay on top of shifts in the industry. You have to adapt to trends, but you can't be distracted by trends, which is, again, that's why I use this word nimble. It's really a fine balance. And again, don't ignore the data before you. I can't believe how much I've seen that happen, where there's obvious data or information, because data really is essentially information, that just gets ignored. Being a successful person in games or making games and putting your stuff out there requires sharp, updated skills, a lot of perseverance. And, how you respond to challenges is also really important. And I think part of also staying nimble in the game industry is also being conscious of how much luck plays in your success, because I think that doesn't get emphasized enough. Sometimes you just get lucky. And so what I did is I took to Facebook the other day, and I'm really lucky that I'm connected to a lot of people in the games industry who are way more successful than I am, and who have been in the industry either a short amount of time or a really long time. And I said to them, hey, Facebook friends that I never really see in person anymore. What do you do to stay relevant in the industry? And these are some of the responses that I got. I'm not naming names, but I told them I would share this. So one is play indie games. And I think this is really important and does not get emphasized enough, is so much innovation comes from the indie game community that I think it's very important to really look at the work that's being done there and to play those games, and to also understand that those games are important and play an important role. And the importance of indie games is only going to grow larger because of all the various ways that we have to reach our audiences compared to when I started in the industry. Own your works. That's another piece of advice. And again, this really depends on what your approach is. But, you know, a lot of times there are folks who say you really have to own what you make. And that's somebody who probably would take more of an entrepreneurial role. If your dream is to join a very large established publisher or developer, it may not be possible to own your work, but it's just really depends on what path you take, and maybe you take different paths. Like I said, everybody's journey is different. Another one is knowing where we came from and what has worked and what has not worked, and understanding who you are creating games for and have a passion for what you do. I thought that was very nicely said. Read GamesBeat. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with GamesBeat. That's a publication devoted to the world of gaming. Dean Takahashi is one of the very well-known game journalists there, who has just done an amazing job, and the whole crew at GamesBeat does an amazing job covering what's going on in our industry. And I read GamesBeat every single day. Play lots of games and not just the types that you like. Again, very important advice, because it really does depend to be exposed to a variety. And, you know, it's okay to have a focus. In fact, it's better to have a focus, but know what's out there. Have a curious and open mind, drawing inspiration from the world around you. Always be learning. Spend time talking to others around the industry. Cultivate the practice of gratitude. Every experience is a lesson, and that goes for good lessons and bad lessons, right? I mean, really, sometimes it's hard to be grateful when there are certain challenges, but at the end of the day, it's really important to, if you can, and it's possible, take whatever lessons are out of that experience. Put players first, extremely important. Every time I see something new that I react harshly about, thinking it's dumb and likely a fad, I stop myself and immediately go in deep. This one was a little bit sarcastic. Be an uncritical workhorse. That was a little bit sarcastically meant, but I did throw that in there. But, you know, part of what really is required around game industry survival is to also stay connected. And I won't spend too much time on this. I think it's pretty obvious, but it's really staying connected to yourself and to others. You know, there's a cliche that I say sometimes, that showing up is half the battle. I can't believe how many opportunities have come my way just from attending a meetup, or attending a conference, or being a part of a Zoom call or a meeting or a webinar, and just reaching out to people and staying connected, but also staying connected to me as a person, as an entrepreneur, as a game developer. You know, what allows me to get up in the morning and feel good about what I'm doing? Am I feeling pressured to be a certain kind of game developer, and it really just doesn't suit me? You know, do I feel like I should be, you know, focusing on a certain kind of genre or a certain role, or that I should be, you know, taking on certain responsibilities? But it really takes a strong sort of core to not only stay connected, take a network, make friends, build relationships, be true to yourself, but again, staying nimble, which is what we talked about, you know. And also, you know, when are my preconceived notions getting in the way? What biases am I bringing into the mix that might get in the way of me launching the game or making a successful product or getting a job in the industry, a company of my dreams. And it's sometimes that's not always in your control, but as long as you're true to yourself and have an open mind and yet still don't get distracted, again, very nimble, not always easy to do. I think it's a huge aspect of being successful. The games industry is very small. I mean, it is a global industry. It's growing. There are more people in it than ever, but it's still a pretty small industry. Define your narrative. When I was going to say at first, control your narrative, but it's really impossible for us to control our narratives. You know, sometimes in the United States, this is referred to as what is your personal brand, but this is much more than that. What's your purpose? What are your core values? What activities are you going to do that define this? And I think depending on what your skills are, it's easier to define your narrative. So we can all think of very famous game designers or very well-known successful people in business. And, hopefully we'll all make that and we'll all achieve that, but sometimes we don't. And sometimes people try to define who you are for you. And that happens a lot because as human beings, we naturally tell stories. We're story-driven people. But, if you find that people try to tell you who you are, maybe look at that and say, this is who I am, and think of ways through your actions and your behavior that might help better convey that. And I'm going to quote, in terms of defining a narrative, I think it's funny. I'm quoting Jeff Bezos, the founder of Amazon, because he wrote a goodbye letter to the board of Amazon in 2020. And I don't know, I think it's funny that I'm using this quote, but it really speaks to me. So his advice to his team when he stepped down from Amazon running it daily is be kind, be original, create more than you consume, and never, never, never let the universe smooth you into your surroundings. It remains day one. And I really found that is a really defining principle that I have always been driven by. So ironically, Jeff Bezos and I agree on something like that. So take that for what you want. Obviously, it goes without saying that great teams equal success. Startups are made or broken, especially early stage startups or early game studios, by the team. I don't think I need to go into that too much, but when an investor is looking at giving team publishing money or seed funding, they really start with the team, especially if there hasn't been a previous success they can point to. They will look at the team and, who's your chief technical person? Who's your product owner? Who can drive business? And maybe you don't have all of those people on board at once, or maybe that's all you. Because if you're just working on your own game, but really success starts with great teams. Transparency is your friend. I'm not going to spend too much time on this. Obviously, we should really be open to candor or radical candor, and we should not only allow certain people in our teams to be more honest or radically candid than others. We should have clear-cut goals for our team, but the center icon is what I really want to focus on here. Contracts and agreements and understanding. A lot of early stage founders, and I've done this myself, you start out feeling very optimistic and you have a great game idea, and sometimes you just come together, you might work with some people to put together a game, and you don't really have things established about roles or participation in terms of equity or ownership. This is your opportunity to really start defining that, even if it's just a term sheet or a memo of understanding. I've seen so many game initiatives get complicated because people feel they have more ownership over a project or they don't have enough ownership. That's another important thing, is, are your interests aligned? It's extremely important to, it can have, those conversations can sometimes be uncomfortable to have, because you can say, listen, you only put in 5 hours a month, and I put in 50 hours a month, and I've invested all of this money to keep this project going. But those conversations, it's better to have those sooner rather than later. And it's better to have those conversations before you need to take on any investment. Extremely important. And that's because the most important thing a potential investor or a publisher is going to look at is, where are their points of risk? Diverse groups make better choices. I think this goes without saying. It's very important that that you have as much diversity on your teams as possible, but also in terms of the networks and the connections that you make. Diverse teams have better outcomes. If you just do a Google search on reports from Credit Suisse or McKinsey or Harvard Business Review, you'll see all sorts of studies that underscore this fact. I can't tell you how many times that I've seen organizations make, maybe not the best informed decisions because they're all talking sort of in a room to each other, and you don't really, it creates sort of what I call an echo chamber. And so a lot of important product and gameplay and business decisions may get made that are just completely absent of hearing other perspectives. And it does make a huge difference. Every game company is a data company. I used to say every company in general is a technology company, but increasingly we are a world that is driven by data and algorithms. It's so essential on every level. In some ways, there might be too much data that gets generated. In the past few years, the world has generated more data than in the previous thousands of years of human history. I mean, think about that. And so our worlds are much more complex. Working in games is much more complex. And it's also important for us to have the skills to know how to collect, analyze, and manipulate data. And so if you take the world of mobile games, for example, we look at things like retention. How much do you hold on to your players after 1 day, 7 days, 30 days? What's your return on ad spend if you're spending money to get players into your game? Are you making more money than you're spending? And how much more are you making? Are you measuring your audiences by cohort? Meaning, are you tracking them from when they come into the game and how you acquired that user, for example, or are they just lumped together in a big group? That kind of stuff is very important. If you're working in the mobile games space again, can you track, and you ought to be able to track, how much you're making per download? How much revenue can you generate per download? And there are also skills that are required for manipulating data and like knowing SQL or having access to Tableau or learning Python. And there are many, many analytics platforms that are out there that you can integrate into your game or use for looking at data. Some of them can be very expensive. So again, information is power. I've also seen situations where game developers will collect so much data, but it's raw data and they don't really know what to do with it. So that's another challenge to avoid. Embracing systems thinking, I did put this in the product area, but in general, as a business or as a game publisher working at a big game company or a small one, or making games, and we have an edge on this because we do make games. We are game developers. Think about systems. Take a holistic approach, not only in the products you make, but also in your role in the ecosystem, the game industry ecosystem, the technology ecosystem, the global entertainment ecosystem. It's very important to think about that as an engine, really, engines of systems and how they all interrelate. This is a really huge thing that I've noticed in the games industry, huge change that, when I started in games, players would contact us all the time with their ideas. And some companies would send back a legal letter saying, thank you very much for your idea. We didn't even look at it. In fact, we'll never use it. And we take no liability if you see anything in our games that reflects anything that you just suggested. Well, that's it's a completely different world now. Really, increasingly, we are seeing players being treated as designers. We're seeing some of the largest and most successful game publishers around the world formalizing player input at extremely early stages, at the design phase. It's becoming more common because it's essential. We'll see large publishers creating community councils or design councils. They will give feedback on design, characters, accessibility. We're seeing such a huge rise around the importance of user-generated content, or UGC, and player choice. And all of those elements are coming together to really put the player front and center in ways that really I think is extremely revolutionary. I've never seen it to such an extent. And along with that is also a very huge and significant move towards giving players more freedom to access and play and experience a game across any device, and to have progression in one device be experienced in another device. So if I'm playing in the cloud, or I'm playing on mobile, or I'm playing on console, and I'm playing that same game, my progression is saved across all of those devices. So it's really the game companies that are just, one or two designers, often a little room, making paper prototypes and not speaking with anyone. I mean, I'm sure those still exist, and they will always exist, I'm sure, to some extent, but that is increasingly changing. I think a lot of you are already aware about the importance of metagame systems to drive engagement. So the core gameplay, obviously extremely important to have a polished experience, but to also put focus in the metagame, the strategy, the methods, the action, the rules, giving the player the sense they're part of something bigger. Also, a metagame is basically the game of the game. What drives players beyond those discrete moment-to-moment interactions that will make them or motivate your players to just come back for more. Again, retention data. And this is my shout out. I want to call your attention to probably one of the most inspirational talks I've seen given about meta systems and games and game engines and systems thinking. It's a presentation by Raf Koster. I'm sure a lot of you have known Raf and his book, The Theory of Fun. But Raf has an amazing presentation on his website called Game Grammar. And I cannot recommend this more highly for anyone here to really look at that and get some amazing thoughts around how we can look at games as little engines, as systems, and how we can apply systems thinking to our game development efforts. Couldn't recommend it more highly. As you can tell, I'm a fan. And I told Raf today on LinkedIn, I added Raf, and I said, hey, Raf, I'm mentioning your slide deck in your talk. So he might be surprised to see a lot more visitors for this particular deck, but I really recommend it. This is something that I think we all need to really embrace, is to adopt a franchise mindset. I can't tell you how often I've seen game developers and publishers not approach their games as a franchise. So if you have a successful game and and it's really successful, especially you want to grow and nurture that audience, grow and nurture that game, make sequels, make add-ons, create an international plan to get the game on as many platforms and distribution channels as you can. I can't tell you how often I've seen really, really, really successful game companies, like I could name names, who have a phenomenal, like, we can only dream of having such a successful game, and they think, oh, well, I did that once, let me move on to 10 other things. And those 10 other things generally fail. They might not fail, but you know, it really takes some presence of mind to really approach everything you do as a franchise, or to have the potential for a franchise. So that could also come down to how you build out your game itself, the pipelines that you make, the infrastructure that you set up around it to allow you to expand and adapt quickly, anticipating market trends and anticipating your audience's needs. And again, the franchise mindset also comes into play when you are, you know, engaging with your players. Your players are, as you probably already know, can be very passionate and dedicated and outspoken about what drives them. And it's just important to definitely think about the longevity of what you're doing as a game and as an effort. Overscoping, I don't think I need to go into this too much, but I've seen this happen a lot. It's easy when you're in the middle of developing a game and things don't feel like they're working. And sometimes there's a tendency to just try to pile on more features, right? Just put more and more and more effects, more features, more distractions, because maybe if I put in these extra elements, people won't notice that maybe my game needs a little bit of work, or the core gameplay is just maybe not that challenging or fun. And, you know, in our industry, that's called gold plating. A lot of gold plating can happen, and it can be timely, it can be expensive. And so if you're using data intelligently, which I'm sure you are, you know, you can look at the core elements of what you're building and saying, well, you know what, I'm noticing a drop off, or this just doesn't seem to be working how I expect it to work. Maybe I need to throw away the core gameplay and start with something new. Or something also I've seen people build out these pretty elaborate apps, for example, and there's one thing in the app that people really like doing, and everything else they don't really enjoy doing as much. So, you know, maybe that's time to take a look at that player behavior, talk to your players if you have access to them, look at the data and say, hey, maybe this one thing that seems to be catching on is what I should really be focusing on. Maybe I should just throw out everything else, or maybe I should just wait with everything else and really build out the thing that seems to keep people coming back and wanting more. And that can be very hard to identify, or to, you know, sometimes it's actually not hard to identify, but it can be hard to listen to that information and take that as information and act on it. Because there's a tendency to just want to keep going, and then you have this overall vision. Timing is everything, you know, and this is a cliche, but it's becoming more and more complex in our industry, the role of timing, because it used to be, you know, don't launch till you're ready. Well, in the mobile game world, that's not how, you know, that's not necessarily how things work. In the mobile game world, for example, you can soft launch. You can, you know, you want to be ready, but you want to soft launch maybe in different territories or areas, geographical areas that are test markets, where you can test out your features, test out your retention, your monetization. You know, timing is everything. In Silicon Valley, they say being too early is just the same as failing. And the same thing with being too late. If you're, being offered an amazing sum of money to build something where the trend is kind of at the top of the trend, you have to really execute quickly, because that trend may not be here in 6 months. And then you might be held developing something that is 6 months old and doesn't necessarily move as nimbly or as readily for the market demands. Another thing about being too early is if you do market launch a game, maybe you might not have been addressing like things like drop off and retention, right? So again, being too early can be just the same as failing. Timing is everything. Timing and luck are often related. So, don't be hard on yourself if for any reason the timing doesn't work out. And then this is a very important Silicon Valley lesson that I learned, is to fail fast. If you're going to fail, then try to do it as quickly as possible. But that's not always an easy thing to do. Larger companies who have, or companies that have a lot of money, can take a longer time to fail with their experiments. They can spend a year and a half perfecting a game, or they can spend a lot of money at once on something and decide it's not working. It really just depends on where those tolerance points are. But it's important that if you do have a failure, that you just have to kind of move on as quickly as possible. Don't make a big deal of your failure. Don't talk about, don't talk about like imposter syndrome. That's a little bit related to staying connected, knowing yourself. But in the United States, there's a lot of talk around, I don't feel like I belong here, or, I'm in this room with all these smart people. Do I really belong here? That is just useless chatter. Everybody fails. Some people are given more of an ability to fail than others because of their position or their financial strength or status. But just know it's just part of learning. So fail fast and know what that means for you. And, I think it goes without saying that, I have not had the great fortune to visit Turkey. I have wanted to visit for a very long time. I've been reading up on the history and the cities and the food and the cuisine, but also the game development ecosystem is just so impressive. As you know better than I, Turkey is a center of innovation. Did you know that from 2015 to the present, that there's been almost $2.5 billion invested in the game industry in Turkey? And I know you're more familiar with some of these acquisitions and investments than I am. For example, you probably already know that Zynga acquired Peak Games for $1.85 billion US. Tencent and Miniclip acquired Massimo. Netmarble acquired Joy Game. You are really a shining example of innovation and all the things to do right in gaming. And so that makes me really happy, because as somebody who got their start in Silicon Valley, I can say that, it's good to know and to see it reinforced that centers of innovation happen all over the world, and it's only going to get more and more connected and growing. So I have so much to learn from what's been happening in Turkey in terms of game development. It's just been so impressive. So there's no better time now to be a game developer in general around the world. This is the time, this is the golden era for game development. you know, I heard, I don't know if this is a worldwide statistic, this might be just for the United States, but I've heard that there are over 30 venture capital firms that focus on investing in the games industry alone. That's unheard of when I started in games. That's so rare and unheard of. And, you know, and that's because a lot of investors realize that you can make smarter bets in games because games are so fundamentally data driven. It's easy to make a lot of bets and to fail fast if they're going to fail, or they can scale exponentially. So, you know, when you take investment money, you know, make sure that you have good representation if you can get it. Make sure you know what you're getting for the money. I'm a big believer that the perfect time to take on investment is when you're already generating revenue, if that's at all possible. But there is no better time than now to work in games. So I wanted to just put this final message out to you, and I want to make sure that I invite you for questions. If you do make it big, and I have no doubt that some of you in this audience or who will see this recording will make it big. And what I mean by making it big really just depends on a lot of factors. But first and foremost, it comes down to the individual. Is it making a successful game on Steam that people love? Is it making a multi-billion-dollar company that gets acquired? But if you do make it big, please, please, please do remember to give back to your community, give back to people getting started, give back to people who've been in the industry for a while, who may be having a hard time finding work, because our industry does still value youth over experience. And I really do believe there's a balance that's needed around that. So that's, I hope this has been useful. I definitely would recommend that you feel free to reach out to me or to Tilting Point if you have a game that you want to show us. I do see one question. Oh, I saw a very nice comment. Thank you, Omer. I very much appreciate that. And I see some comments in the chat, but I don't know if there's any. Oh yeah, it's just instructions around using these stuff. But yeah, like, I just really wish you all the best, and I hope you all do stay in touch, and let me know if I can ever answer questions now or in the future. Let me see if there's anything else. Yes.
Okay, Margaret, thank you so much for your presentation. And I see only Ömer's comment, and you already read it. And I guess that's all. There is no more questions because you presented really well. Thank you so much.
It can be hard.
Yeah, I can understand. In the portal of Indieway, you can, if you like, you can check the games, and if anyone comes to ask you something about your company, or to make a connection with you to publish their games, I hope you can answer that too. Other than that, after the event, you already gave your contact details. They can try to reach you from there as well. Thank you so much for joining us in the webinar.
Oh yes, and I did have one. I'm so sorry to. I'm putting my Twitter contact, Margaret Wallace, and LinkedIn. It should be that. And I did see one quick question. I have only one question. What leads the trends in games? There's a bottom-up experience, creation from the bottom up, and then money. And players. So that's my shorthand answer. I hope that's not too crass. Anyway, so thank you. Thanks, everybody.
So also, will you share your contacts with the attendees? If they want to post their games to you, how can they reach you, from LinkedIn or Twitter, which you prefer? Okay. Okay, I will share this in the attendee chat because we just see that in the as panelists.
Absolutely. And I'll put one more in there. Sorry about that. I should have had this ready. And there's my LinkedIn. So I really wish everyone much success, and I hope to maybe meet you all someday in person one of these days.
Okay, I will copy those things if I can. Just a second. Okay, I shared it. Oh, sorry. Just one letter missing.
No, I saw.
It's so weird. I can't copy paste it. It's so weird.
I totally hear you. I've seen that too. You would think a very simple.
Yeah. Okay. Yes, this is the right one.
Okay. Yes, I noticed. I was just chatting to the.
Yeah, thank you so much for attending. Hope
Thank
to see
you.
our other events as well. See you later.
Bye. Take care, everybody.